Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and hi if you're new here, I'm Jade and today it is time for my March wrap up. I'm seeing it at a very slightly different angle to usual because I do have my cat asleep next to me. Bless him. He's been alone all day because I've been out at the doctors. Don't worry, nothing serious. Just a checkup on my back after having back issues. If you've seen some of my past videos, let's get straight on into the video and let me share what I have read this month. Overall, a really strong month. Maybe my best one. I don't know. I genuinely like every book I read. I am pretty good, I think, at picking out like what I know I'm gonna like. So I will say my kind of negative reviews are usually few and far between, but this month overall, I just feels like really strong. So the first book I read in March was Over the Influence, which is JoJo's memoir. If you don't know JoJo, she is a singer who was huge back when I was sort of like, I want to say like almost a teenager. I think I'm a couple of years younger than JoJo. But she was like a child prodigy singer. She let out her first single when she was like 13. Yeah, I love her, and she's been doing some more stuff recently. And it was just really, really interesting to sort of read about her life and the pressures of the industry and all that she's been through. I just find this sort of stuff really fascinating because I love music. I'm a singing teacher, if you didn't know. So yeah, for me, this was super interesting. I know it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I do think the odd sort of autobiography and learning about other people is really interesting. So yeah, for me, I gave it a 5 star because I kind of feel like unless it's written really poorly, that when I'm rating like an autobiography, it's their own life story. And it just feels a bit rude to kind of give it any other rating, but I genuinely enjoyed reading this. So the second book I read in March was Heir by Sabaa Tahir. I bought this a little while ago. I read her book All My Rage last year and I loved it. And then I saw she did fantasy and romantasy, and I was like, I should try this. So yeah, I picked this one up. I didn't really realize that apparently it is kind of like a spin-off to the original series that she wrote, like Ember in the Ashes, which I haven't read. But from what I gather, you can read this as standalone. I read it as standalone and I managed to follow the story. Whether I would have got more into it if I'd have read the others, I don't know. But I still gave it a 3.75. I just found it a little slow to get into. And there were just certain parts that I was enjoying more than others because essentially we were following like different characters, and there are just certain ones that I just got more interested in. Please excuse Tato, who wants to be part of the video. So yeah, there are just certain characters that I was like more interested in following. But essentially the story follows 3 characters called A's, Quill and Saoirse, I'm pretty sure. I might need to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's what they were called. And their lives all sort of then intertwine. They all end up together, kind of helping each other on their kind of like, I guess you could say, missions. And yeah, it all just kind of like intertwines their whole story. So essentially, the character of Ace is set out to help her people. They are struggling. They have had a really poor leader. So she kind of wants to get out and help them. So that's kind of her story without giving too much away. Saoirse is someone who can track people through magic, and she's hired to go and kill a murderer for someone. So that's her sort of plot line. And then Quill is a prince who is out to save his kingdom. And as I said, all their stories intertwine and there's a bit of romance and everything. So yeah, I did really enjoy it. As I said, just like the odd bit a little bit slow, but generally I would definitely recommend. So the third book I read was actually an arc that I was gifted by the author. So it's The Dream Killer by Adam Cosco. I will put a photo of the cover up here because I had it as an ebook. If you know me, you know I don't read a lot of ebooks. So if I'm gonna give a book time as an ebook, then you've got to know that I definitely feel interested, or maybe the author was just super nice about asking me to read it. But there will be a reason why I pick it up. Okay. And as you can probably see at the bottom of the screen, I have given it a 5 star. I will admit, I found it a little bit slow to get into at first. I was reading it and I was like, okay, this is okay, but like there's nothing special about it. But it's split into like 3 parts, and once you hit part 2, it kind of like changes, and then part 3 changes again, and we kind of get taken on this very, very wild ride. But essentially, the book starts with a guy who is watching the news about this girl that has been murdered, and then he actually finds her body in his basement. He doesn't remember killing her. He swears he didn't kill her. His mum's there having dinner with him, and the police come and it's all a little bit crazy, and then it goes through exploring the idea of being affected in your dreams, etc. There's so many twists that I can't say too much without giving the plot away, but it's really, really cleverly written. So I gave it 5 stars because of the amount of twists in this and the fact that I guess it doesn't have a super, super solid conclusion to an extent. And I kind of like that. I like that this really plays with your brain. It has some really clever, interactive kind of inserts in the book. As long as stay on that, there's some interactive elements to the book, which I think is really clever. It's not something I've personally come across in a book, like maybe you have, and it wouldn't be so unique. But for me, it was. I don't want to give anything away in case you're thinking of picking it up. But essentially, it was also a very easy read. It wasn't very long. So I would say, like, if you're a fan of someone like Freida McFadden, it's probably worth giving it a go. I think this is less obvious where it goes than sometimes Freida's plots are. But in terms of accessibility to read and just kind of easily to get engrossed into, I think this is kind of up there. As I said, the first part to me was the slowest part of this book, but I still wasn't bored at any point. And so, yeah, I just had to give it 5 stars because for me, it was really clever. So the third book I read in March was The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. And oh my God, do I wish I had read this sooner. I'd previously read Kristin Hannah's The Great Alone. Then my husband bought me this one. And I also have The Four Winds on my TBR. And I just reached for this because, I don't know, we had quite a stormy March. We had a lot of like windstorms and just generally miserable weather. So I don't know, there's something about kind of like either thrillers or like historical fiction that often just kind of appeals to me when the weather's a little bit more like dark and dank. I feel like I go for more for like romance when it's like sunny and happy. But yeah, I found myself reaching for this and I was like, I should have read this sooner. I loved it. So this is historical fiction and it is set around the World War II era. I love World War II novels. I've loved many of the famous ones like The Boy in Striped Pajamas and The Tattooist of Auschwitz, for example. So yeah, I really love this one because it was actually set in France, so it was a little bit different. We weren't like set inside a war camp. This was a little bit different. It was about two sisters, Vianne and Isabel, and they all get caught up when Paris gets raided. They move away, then they end up getting separated. Isabel wants to like help on the war front. She ends up becoming quite an integral part of saving people during the war. I don't want to say too much else, but essentially, they are two sisters fighting their own battles through the war, which is really interesting just to sort of see a woman's perspective of what was happening outside of the war camps for people that perhaps weren't Jewish or just had Jewish friends, etc. Like it was just a little bit of a different take and experience of the war. So I really, really enjoyed this and it's so emotional. I love it. So if you didn't read it, I gave this 5 stars. Absolutely deserves it. So my next read in March was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I don't know if this is a book I would generally have picked up, although I'd seen it mentioned quite a few times, but essentially my book club chose this as March's read, and I was pleasantly surprised. Essentially it is about a woman who makes friends with an octopus, and I was like, sounds kind of bizarre, but like, I'm willing to give it a go. But I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.75 stars because it does bounce back perspectives, and I kind of felt like the octopus should have been in the book more, quite frankly. Best character and just wasn't in it enough. But Tova, the old lady he makes friends with, I loved her character generally, apart from there is this part where she is talking about moving and she talks about having to like leave her cat behind. And I'm like, why would you do that? Your cat is your family member. Like, sorry, that's something I feel passionate about. Animals are for life. And fair enough if she had someone like who was really, really willing to take it or something, but it kind of makes out that she was just going to kick it back out on the streets from where she rescued it if she couldn't find somewhere or not. That was the only thing. I just could not connect with that character for that reason. And I do think that's partly why I went, because I was going to give it a 4, but then I was like, thought about that. I was like, no, 3.75. However, taking my prejudices aside, I did really enjoy Tova as a character. I loved her relationship with the octopus. And then there's other characters in the story, and it all sort of ends up intertwining. So there's essentially a guy called Cameron. He is one of our main characters, and I liked him, but I just found myself really wanting to read the chapters from the perspective of Marcellus the octopus or Tova much more. So therefore, that's another reason I didn't want to rate it too high, because even though I did really like it, I was definitely more attracted to certain chapters than others, if that makes sense. I do find that often happens to me when I read something from many perspectives. There's always a perspective that usually that I just lean towards, and then it kind of makes me race through the other parts. But overall, a really good read and very different and unique, and I love it for that reason. Then the next book I picked up was Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. I loved this, okay? I had heard so many mixed opinions and reviews on this from people I know, from watching things on like BookTube, BookTok, etc. But I have to say, I really, really liked it. Therefore, I decided to give it 5 stars because for me, there was just something really unique and interesting about it. I did almost not give it 5. I almost gave it 4.5 because I cannot connect with the characters. I don't really like any of the characters most of the time in the book. Like, it's a really hard one to explain without giving too much away. But essentially, what happens is there are 2 friends that are writers. One's very successful, the other not so, and they just happen to be together when one of them passes away, and the other one steals her manuscript and passes it off as her own, which, you know, is obviously a huge sin. However, despite that, I still found myself rooting for the one who had stolen the manuscript at some time. And I was like, I shouldn't be feeling like this. I should want them to get caught. Like, it's terrible what they've done. And then I just found like sometimes I didn't want them to get caught, and other times I was just like, oh, please get caught, just like owner. And I was like a little frustrated with that, honestly. But it's just a really unique storyline to me because it's a book about writing books, kind of, and I love that idea, and it kind of explores the whole publishing industry and all of the things to do with that. And I just thought that was really interesting. So yeah, I decided to give it 5 stars because I was addicted the whole way through. The next book I picked up was Watermoon by Samantha Sotto Yambao. I really enjoyed this. I will say I read it at a time when Sunrise of the Reaping was due out, and mine got delayed, my pre-order. And so maybe I was kind of more anxiously awaiting that book than being in a complete like frame of mind for this, but I still really enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars. But essentially, I'd wanted this book for a while. There's something about the word moon. I love it. I kind of wanted to call my cat Moon, but my husband was like, no. So that's why he's Tato, short for potato. Yeah, I just love the word moon. And so this book had appealed to me for quite a while. I actually entered like a competition to win it back in January and I didn't. And I actually ordered it not too long after that, but it just took ages for some reason to come. It got sort of delayed. So I finally got it and I was like, yeah, I'm going to read it. So if you have read Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I know that book was quite popular at a time. This has a sort of similar beginning actually. And I was like, oh, is this going to be like really similar? But what the difference is this is actually a pawn shop. It is not a coffee shop cafe. And then what happens in this shop is people can like give up the memory of their regrets. So they can like give up their regrets to this pawn shop. And then obviously they have like a sort of clear conscience, clear frame of mind or whatever. And the pawn shop take the memory. Which is kind of interesting. So that's how it starts, and you can hopefully see the similarity if you have read Before the Coffee Gets Cold, but then it rapidly changes pace and plot. So the man that had owned this pawn shop was handing it down to his daughter. We learn that at the beginning of the book, and then essentially it's her day to take over, and she goes downstairs and it looks like there's been a break-in. Then a customer turns up. People, by the way, can only find this pawn shop if they're meant to. It's kind of like hidden magically, I guess you could say. And this guy comes in at this particular moment where everything's like ransacked and the daughter is panicking, thinking, you know, maybe her dad's been kidnapped. So essentially she belongs to another world. There's a whole other world that this shop is attached to. So I guess you can say, for our sake, like a fantasy world. And this guy from the real human world wants to help her. So she actually takes him through to her world, and they start this whole mission trying to unravel all kind of like her family history, honestly. It's kind of linked, and what's happened to her dad. And I could go on, but I kind of want you to experience it for yourself if you want to read it. I don't want to give anything really away. But yes, there's a little bit of a love story. And it's just a really interesting concept with like the world as we know it versus this fantasy behind the scenes kind of world. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very unique concept. So then I actually gave up waiting for my Sunrise on the Reaping to appear because it got stuck in the same city for about 4 or 5 days. So I just went and bought the book and started reading it. I now have 2 copies I need to return. My one that arrived late because that turned up just over a week after it was released. However, Sunrise on the Reaping, I loved this. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, if I'm honest. I did really like it, but I found it a little slow to start. I found like certain parts of it just seemed a little bit extra to the text. Like I felt like they could have cut the words and still had the same story a lot with the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Whereas honestly, this book, I loved it from start to finish. I was hooked. Even the end of the first chapter, it ends on a kind of gasp moment. I just loved it. I loved reading Haymitch's story. I love Haymitch's character in the Hunger Games series, so I kind of suspected I would love this one. Now, I know we learned a lot about his story in the original trilogy, but it's been so long since I read that, I couldn't remember all the details. I could remember bits of it, like maybe like the big sort of thing at the end, but that's kind of it. It's hard for me to talk about without giving the plot away, but if you are a fan of the original trilogy and you still haven't picked up Sunrise on the Reaping, do it because it's so good. Of course, I gave this 5 stars because for me there was just no other way to rate it. I was hooked. Then the next book I read was The Housemaid's Secret, which is the second book in the Housemaid series by Freida McFadden. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4.5 because, like most of her books, it's very easily readable, very easy to get absorbed into, but I didn't quite like it as much as the first Housemaid. I wouldn't say it was like fully predictable, but I think because I already knew the character, I kind of saw where certain things might go. So in the first book, so I'm not like, giving away anything. In the first book, essentially, the girl who is the housemaid has recently got out of prison, and as that story unravels, you kind of find out why, and then it all leads into this whole drama and thriller story with her being a housemaid. It's really hard to say too much about the series without giving the plot away, so I don't want to say too much. But if you've read the first one but not the second one, I will say I think you'll like it if you like the first one because it's very similar vibes. It's a little bit different though, which I do appreciate that it has like some sort of story progression. But for me, I just didn't like it quite as much. I think just because I did see things coming a little bit more knowing the character, but I still really enjoyed it. So I would definitely recommend this series if you like your kind of easy read thrillers. Then next, I picked up In the Likely Event by Rebecca Yarros. I purchased this the end of last year, I think, and I don't know, I just kind of fancied reading it right now. I'm not due to fly anywhere anytime soon, so reading a book that starts with a plane crash kind of felt like now was the time while I'm not flying. In my head, this was going to be a 5-star because pretty much everything I've read by Rebecca Yarros, which is Fourth Wing Iron Flame, Onyx Storm, and also her book The Last Letter, I have rated a 5-star, but I have gone with 4.5 for this one. Obviously still very good rating, I still really enjoyed it, but for me the romance story just wasn't quite as strong or emotional as The Last Letter, and if I'm going to compare the two, I would pick The Last Letter over it any day, so therefore I just had to knock the rating down a little bit. But essentially the storyline of this is it starts off with our characters Nate and Izzy. It jumps between perspectives of them both, and they are our love interests. They end up seated together on a plane that crashes, and things spiral from there. They seem to be like destined almost to be in each other's lives. We kind of jump between the past and the present, so we see like past scenarios with them, and we're also in the present where they have wound up in the same place yet again, and they're, it kind of explores their relationship, why it's so difficult, and why their romance is really hard for them to kind of figure out. So I really like the concept. I like that it jumps between time, but as I said, I just didn't feel as emotionally invested in this one as The Last Letter, but still a really good story. And then the final book I read was also an ebook, which was The Full Risk by Abby Jimenez. I just read it because it was free with Amazon Prime, and I really loved Part of Your World last year by Abby Jimenez, so I thought I would slot this short story in because I'd seen a few people talking about it, and if I'm honest, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I gave it a 3.5 stars because I do appreciate it is a short story and you can't really get the same level of investment in something that is so short. But for me, I think that maybe Abby tried to put a little bit too much into a short story. But essentially what it is about is there are 2 neighbours who are in the same apartment block, and these builders come in and remove the stairs so they can't get out. Builders had removed the wrong stairs, so they'd gone in the wrong apartment block, so it wasn't supposed to happen, which is why they're both in this scenario, and now they're trapped up there until the builders can come out after the weekend to restore the stairs. So a little bit of a weird, unlikely scenario, but I really appreciated the general relationship. I really liked the two characters. They didn't previously really know each other, and so they get to know each other as neighbors because they're next door to each other, and obviously it's a bit of a love story, okay? And yeah, it just is kind of exploring their relationship trapped up there, and what's going on in their lives. However, there's a lot of kind of like subplots, and they were very, very brief because of the fact that this is a short story, and I felt therefore that it just felt a little bit rushed. So I loved the main characters, and I think if this was like developed into a full story, I would love it. I was living for the characters, but for me it was just like some of the subplots, it was just a few lines and then it was all resolved, and it just seemed a bit quick as a result. That's all I'm going to say, but I really, really enjoyed it. And if you like Abby Jimenez, it's free to read on Amazon Prime. It's a short story, it's an easy read. I'd still recommend reading it. Okay, and that is everything I read in March. So as you can see, quite a mixed month, from biographies to thrillers to fantasies to romances. So yeah, a really good month actually. I really appreciate that I generally read a lot of different things. You know, historical fiction in there. I don't even know what Remarkably Bright Creatures really comes under, but I loved it, and I would recommend all of the books I read. So yeah, let me know what you've been reading, and if you love any of the books, if you have any thoughts on any of these books that I've mentioned, let me know. Because yeah, I love to hear what other people think. I like to start book discussions. I will see you again real soon. Bye!